Hello and welcome to Profiles in Risk. This is your host, Tony Cañas. And if you are listening to this on the podcast version, on the audio version, you might want to check out the YouTube version. I will make sure to include a link to the YouTube version because we have increased our quality massively in the last few weeks. And today I have with me Larry Nicholson, and we're both in at least HD. Larry Nicholson is the president of the board of directors at Site. Larry, thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Tony. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic, and thank you for playing along with all my new tech as we figure out how to record using this system. I can't actually guarantee that it'll work. So if you guys are listening to this, it means that the experiment worked. Awesome. So Larry, I know you from CPCU, and I think a little bit from Site. But I always go ahead and give you the chance to give the elevator pitch. So the floor is all yours.
Absolutely, Tony. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We first met each other, I think, in 2018 at the CPCU Leadership Conference in Baltimore. And that was a great session of about 300 to 400-ish CPCU designees and industry professionals. And I had a chance to speak there along with Greg Olson. We spoke about grit and leadership. Within the insurance industry. So it was great to be there and meet you in person and also everyone else who was in attendance.
So this is really interesting. I'm a huge fan of Grit, the book. I did not get to watch the session on Grit. I was there, but as usual, I got distracted. You know, I'm ADHD and I know everybody at CPCU. I've been to every leadership meeting since 2011. Every leadership summit. So I did not get to watch it, but Greg did give me a Grit rubber band, or whatever those are called,
the wristband
bracelet, and I wore it for about a year until my girlfriend was like, please, like, it's time to move on. So I stopped wearing it, but so it's really funny. I always think about about that topic, and I think of Greg. I didn't actually watch it. And he's the one that gave me the bracelet, so I did not realize that was with you.
Okay. Absolutely. Greg and I worked for about maybe 4 or 5 months putting the whole Grit presentation together and getting a lot of the content. But the wristbands and the bracelets you described, it was kind of like a spinoff of the previous Got Milk era. Instead of Got Milk, it was Got Grit. And part of the session was to really encourage people, if they didn't believe that they had enough grit for whatever they wanted to achieve within their insurance careers, that you can wear the wristband Got Grit. And so every day when you're working or you're doing certain things within your career, you could always strive for more and perseverance and just achievement.
100% agree. I'm such a fan of that book that I have only one sister. So I grew up as an only child. And my mom made the bad decision of having a second kid when I was 16. And my sister turned out to be okay. So she is right now, I'm from Costa Rica originally. She is in med school right now in the Czech Republic. And I was a really crappy student my whole life. She was a really good student her whole life. We're radically opposite people, right? So anyway, the very first time I think it was chemistry class at the beginning of med school. She was still in Costa Rica at that time. The very first time she failed a class. She had been a straight A student all through high school. So I think her second semester of college, she fails chemistry. And I was about to visit Costa Rica for Christmas. So I brought her a copy of Grit.
Great.
And I wrote on the kind of on the first page, I wrote, Lucy, I'm glad that you have finally failed at something. Not only does that make me look better, but also at some point you will fail and you'll have to learn. The most important part is recovering. The most important predictor of success is not how smart or how good student you are, is recovering from whatever failure you get. So please read the book.
Yeah. And part of the Grit presentation that we gave several times, it was kind of like Greg and I were on tour. We were going from like conference to conference. We were at CPCU. We were at the Site conference. We were at PLRB and all these other conferences doing grit and on webinars. And one of the things that we do is we actually encourage people to fail. And people initially will say, "What? You want me to fail? I'm all about achievement. I don't like
And
failing." And
and by
we
the
actually
way,
encourage that.
those are all insurance conferences, and failing in insurance is not something, right? Tech encourages people to fail,
Hmm.
right? The insure techs encourage people to fail. The traditional carriers, this is not the normal insurance way, right? Failing is not how you grow your career in the traditional insurance world. But I agree, if you're not failing, you haven't found your limit, right?
Exactly, exactly. And
And
a lot of the
go ahead.
feedback we get from people as a part of that, they'll say, "Well, I was in underwriting for 2 years and I may not have liked it as much." And so they moved on to perhaps claims. And maybe after 2 years from that, they moved on to product development or sales. And although that might be looked at as a failure because the person wasn't able to last in those jobs, they were actually not failing. They were actually gaining more experiences and thus they were able to grow their careers.
Point me to an executive that thinks that switching functions within the industry in your first few years is failure, and I will point you to an executive that no longer belongs in the executive ranks. I started my session on millennials by telling boomers not to retire because we're not ready to lose their knowledge.
Hmm.
Uh, and I make a living selling consultants, which are usually boomers because they're the most experienced, right? But yeah, if you consider that failure, please go ahead and retire, or give me a call and let me change your mind. uh, Also, I think that my audience is probably very familiar with CPCU because I talk about CPCU all the time. But shame on me, I don't know if I've ever mentioned Site, even though I've been a speaker at this one Site conference. So tell us about Site.
Yeah, so SITE, for those of you wondering what it stands for, is the Society of Insurance Trainers and Educators. So our primary mission is really to work with a lot of trainers within the insurance industry and work with the trainers to incorporate different training programs within their companies or their practices so that as employees, if you're an underwriter or a claims person at your company, your trainers are probably a member of SITE and we're all working together to learn best practices, to see what are the new trends. One of the fascinating trends right now in training that we're discussing as an organization is the um, artificial intelligence, as well as looking at virtual reality to deliver training. And it's just really fascinating that we're already seeing insurance companies utilize virtual reality to deliver training to their employees, especially in a remote environment, right?
So let
And
me pause you there for a second. Especially
sure.
because you did not warn me that we were going to talk about VR, so I couldn't have taken the time to like take this out of the closet. I'm a VR enthusiast. I normally, not the case in this apartment because we've moved around too much, but I normally have dual VR room scale setups. I have both what's it called, an Index, and a first generation Oculus Rift, not the newest one.
Okay.
And I also have the Quest 2 Pro, which is hopefully making all the other ones obsolete, and my girlfriend will finally be thrilled that I don't have to drill holes into the walls of the next place we live in because this one doesn't
Oh
need them.
goodness.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I'm a huge VR guy, and I can definitely see how VR would be super helpful in training. And in fact, it reminds me of American Modern, who I worked for. I wasn't in claims at that time, but American Modern has this amazing, and I'm guessing other carriers have similar things, but I got to see that one. This amazing training facility that has a house, a mobile home, a classic car, and like every claims trainee gets to physically work on those things, like hands-on, make estimates and stuff, and it's they end up with really good claims people. I can see how VR could be really used for that. Uh, so the
Absolutely.
VR piece I totally get, but the AI piece, how is AI being used in training?
Well, and that's the Oculus 2 Quest, and it's my understanding with the Oculus 2 Quest, which I have one as well. It's a great device. There's an app on there. It's called Job Simulator, and if you've ever downloaded that app or used that app, Job Simulator, on the Oculus Quest, it's actually putting you to work, and so you can actually see what it feels to an employee to learn how to be a cashier at a grocery store and how to be an accountant and do all these different things, how to greet customers. And so that's just one small use case as to how virtual reality is already being used in various industries. But over the past 3 to 4 years, we're starting to see more insurance companies take that up as a training practice. But with respects to artificial intelligence, it's kind of it's co-mingling with the virtual reality. So learning how the particular employee develops over time. So if they take their first claims adjusters course, and then 3 or 6 months later, it's actually monitoring the progress as to how that adjuster does on their estimates or speaking with customers. And then it's using that artificial intelligence to deliver the next virtual reality training to that adjuster. So it's picking up different tidbits of how that progression is taking place throughout the career to customize what trainings and what learning programs that employee or claims adjuster in this example should take next. Traditionally in training decades ago, it was you took the trainings that your company or your boss thought that you should take. But you used to say, well, at least for me as well, why am I taking this class? Why am I in this training class for 2 hours?
You don't have to go back
hours?
decades for
Exactly.
this.
I don't have to take this, but with virtual reality and just other artificial intelligence types of things that are being used for training, we're starting to see that training progression be more meaningful to the employee and to the adjuster or underwriter or risk manager, to where it's actually giving them exactly what they need in bite-size chunks rather than full courses. Think just YouTube,
generationally, as you know, and as the audience knows, right? Everything in my mind always goes in the lenses of the different generations. Generationally, that is what your millennials and especially your Gen Zers want. Right? I'm an older millennial. I'm perfectly happy sitting through an in-person class, post-COVID or pre-COVID, like once we can. I'm perfectly happy sitting in an in-person class for 2 or 3 days. Rather than a long webinar, but your Gen Zers want bite-sized. They want hands-on immediately, like from the day they start in the company, and they want to have a library of bite-sized content for whatever they need help with. So
absolutely,
it makes perfect sense that I'm so glad to hear that. Because I don't live in the training space, so it's very cool to hear that this is actually happening in insurance companies. Very, very cool. Are there any companies that you can mention by name that the cool things you're doing on the training space? And if you can't mention them by name, I totally understand. In your space.
Well, if anyone does a Google search, public information, Farmers Insurance is a company that has showed the use case and continue to utilize virtual reality, particularly in their claims training. And it's been very successful and rave reviews by the adjusters to actually learn how to adjust using virtual reality.
So are you telling me that Farmers University is real? The one from the commercials?
It is.
So this is... Okay, so I spoke at Farmers about millennials and insurance. Oh, God, that was what? Probably 2 years ago now, because it feels like less than that, but I've been stuck at home for a year, so probably 2 years ago, in Michigan, and it's the only time I've been to Michigan, by the way, other than the airport, and it was a great experience. Like I don't want to in any and it was a very engaged group that I spoke to, so I very much enjoyed it. But I was a little disappointed that it had the Farmers University sign, but there were no cool displays like the ones for the commercial. Like, I'm okay with the actor not being there, but the displays, I kind of wanted those.
I'm sure you did.
But it's very cool to know that they are doing cool stuff. So thank you. That is very, very cool to know. And another thing that I'm curious. So if I work for a carrier, which probably at least half of my listeners work for a carrier, but I'm not in the training department, right? If I'm in the training department, I probably already know about Sight. But if I'm not in the training department, how can I become involved? So let's say that my company is a member, but I myself am not, because I'm not a trainer. How can I take advantage of Sight? And what if I'm interested in becoming a trainer someday? So those are kind of two separate questions, but still.
Well, the philosophy we have at Sight is you don't necessarily have to be a formal insurance trainer, so your job title doesn't have to have training in it. And so we're big believers that we're all trainers in some regard, whether or not we're training our coworker or we're training our boss or we're training whoever needs help in our organizations. And so we all like to educate our customers, educate our coworkers. And so we're trainers. And so we have a lot of members who are aspiring to actually have a formal training role. And the good news is that they're able to sign up as a member of site and commingle and network with trainers already to learn more about the industry, to learn more about training techniques, training philosophy. We actually have a certification course. It's the
I didn't
Site
know
Train the
that.
Trainer certification course.
Okay.
And once you're finished with that course and you have a certain level of experience, you can actually qualify for our ITP designation, which is the Insurance Training Professional designation, which is recognized by AM Best as an industry designation. So we love to see that progression of people new to training, and then they get involved with site, they get the certification, they network, they get the ITP, and then they grow their careers as formal insurance trainers.
Oh, I love that, and I get at least a few calls in the chat with Tony, where people want to move over to a training site, and what I historically have told them is, be careful. I mean, training is the first thing to get cut when there's a problem, right? When there's an economic challenge, be careful. But with that said, I totally get it. It's a great job. It's a very fulfilling job. And I have no idea how to help you get there, but take a look at site, right? And usually they don't know what site is. So I take a look at site. I don't actually know how they can help you, but I'm sure they can. This is really cool that I can now better speak to how you guys can help. That is very, very cool. How much is the membership if I'm paying out of pocket? And if you know out of hand, if I'm paying out of pocket, how much is the membership for a person?
Our basic memberships for an individual is $199, and that's for the entire year.
Oh, that's cheap.
And that gets you all access to our monthly webinars, access to all our networking, our LinkedIn group, our newsletters, all the education information that we have. It gets you all that access for the entire year.
That's awesome. That is really awesome. That I can swing that out of pocket. Or let's put it this way: a mid-career professional who has enough experience to become a trainer can usually swing that out of pocket, even if they can't get manager support. That is fantastic to know.
Absolutely.
Really fantastic to know.
We have thousands of industry professionals in our LinkedIn group. So even if people are looking to network or if they're looking to learn more about the industry, our LinkedIn group is a really great way to get connected with more trainers, bounce ideas off of each other, and just get more involved and immersed within the training space.
Send me the link to that, and I'll include it in the show notes. Because that's going to be super, super helpful to people. Awesome. That is really, really awesome.
Yeah.
So feel free to say more about site if there's more that you really want to share. I do want to have a little bit of the career conversation.
Sure.
It was the original reason that we opened the podcast and the original reason that we opened Insurance Nerds. And unfortunately, I don't get to have it often enough because 80% of episodes, maybe more, are InsurTech people. Because I have a hard time, or rather, the traditional insurance people have a hard time getting permission to come on the podcast. I'm very curious about your career. So looking at your LinkedIn, so it looks like you've got a bachelor's in economics. St. Leo, where's that located at?
St. Leo is based out of Florida.
So you've always been Florida. Okay.
Yeah, I've been in Florida all my life.
Perfect. And then sometime later, you got both an executive MBA from University of South Florida and the famous. I'm so envious. I've been flirting with this program for years. The MS in Risk Management and Insurance from Florida State.
Yes.
So you started your career as a was it as an agent with Allstate?
Absolutely. Started as an agent, and it was funny because I was graduating high school, and that summer college was starting in that fall, and that summer my father said, "What are you going to do this summer? You're not just going to stay home." And I said, "Well, I want to." It's like I got into college, and he goes, "No, you're not staying home this summer." So he goes, "You got to get a job." And so I was like, "What am I going to do?" So I was actually riding down the street one day, and I saw a sign at an Allstate office saying hiring.
I saw the sign.
Yeah. And I didn't know what Allstate was or what they did. I just saw the sign hiring. I knew my dad, who was military, was telling me I needed to find a job. So gave them a call and asked if they were hiring. And they told me I had to have a license. I said, a license? And the gentleman who picked up was actually the owner and told me a reference of how to get the license. And I actually took the class. And just right on cue, the same day I passed the course, I got a phone call from him asking if I had a chance to look more into the class. And I said, actually, as a matter of fact, I just passed the course. And then I started that following Monday. And I've been in insurance ever since.
So you started. So this was according to your LinkedIn 2006, which is, by the way, the same time that I graduated college. So we're probably about the same age. So you started as an Allstate agent, just like in an agency. And so did they hand you a phone book like the good old days, or what was in 2006? What was that no call list already in place? What did it look like in 2006 at an Allstate agency?
We definitely had a no call list, but we had a lot of leads that were cold, and part of my job was to go through those cold leads and start making contact and grow some business for the agency. The good news is the agency happened to be one of the top agents in the Northeast Florida for Allstate, so we were already had a lot of customers that were already affiliated with us. So I was calling them to upsell current customers.
Okay. Yeah. That's much better than calling cold. So
exactly.
That's good.
Exactly.
That is good. So personal lines, I'm guessing, for Allstate.
Personal lines mainly. There was a little bit of commercial in there. The personal lines was really kind of where I learned first.
Okay, so why didn't you stay as a lifelong agent? There's great money in the agency space.
There is, and that's a good question, Tony. So I was actually that summer or that fall I was going to college. I was going to go to school to be a financial analyst. I had an economics degree in things like business and economics, and so I wanted to actually go work on Wall Street. And
I'm glad we saved you.
Exactly. I'm glad I saved myself. But the owner at the time of the agency, he was an entrepreneurial. So although he was an Allstate agent, had done very well, he had other entrepreneurial passions and visions. And so one day, after about a year, he comes into the office and he says, Larry, I'm going to close the agency and I'm going to open a car dealership. And I says, you're going to do what? He goes, yeah, I'm going to sell the agency. I already have a buyer and I'm going to be starting a car dealership. Used cars. Do you want to be a salesman for my used car dealership?
So do you want to go from the second most disliked job in the country to the most disliked job in the country?
Exactly. Used cars at that. So I said, no, thank you. And actually found a job at a state-run organization. At the time was the largest property insurance company in Florida, Citizens Property Insurance.
I want to take a moment to thank you for recognizing that the listeners are not all in Florida. Because I can't tell you how often Florida is its own insurance world, right? And I can't tell you how often when you talk to Florida people who work in the industry, they speak Florida language, right? So they tell you the number of their license, like I have 404 or whatever. I don't know the numbers, but immediately when they say the number, I know they're talking Florida. And the other thing they do is they assume that everybody knows what Citizens is. And if you're not in Florida, you probably don't know what Citizens is. Right. So anyway, continue.
Yeah. So just real quick, Citizens is a state-run property insurance company that was created as a carrier of last resort and was really formed after Hurricane Andrew, when a lot of the Florida domestic companies just paid a lot in claims and couldn't really survive. They created Citizens to really come in and take on those policies that couldn't find coverage in the standard market. So that's how Citizens was really formed. And so I left the agency and I was applying for a job there, and they called me in for an interview, and they had liked a lot of the things I had to say from my work at the agency. And because they were the largest company or the largest property insurer at that time, they needed underwriters and actually made me an offer, and I accepted it.
So the words that you said are very interesting. They were the largest insurer in Florida at the time. That is not a good thing if you are the carrier of last resort, right? So what I think, I've never worked in Florida, but what I think is fascinating about the Florida insurance market, one of the many things, is how Citizens is always trying to depopulate, right? It's kind of and I think they've been very successful at it. But it's the opposite, right? Every other insurance company is trying to grow. Citizens is trying to shrink, because the more business they have, the worse the health of the overall Florida market is, and that's why they have it. So that is very interesting. By the way, you mentioned Hurricane Andrew. If you are a young insurance professional listening to this, you have no idea how much Hurricane Andrew changed our industry. Go read up on it. And if I have a listener out there who was working in the industry, preferably in the leadership, when Andrew hit, and if you were anywhere near Florida, I would love to hear your story. Please reach out. I'd love to have you on the podcast. So how was it being an underwriter for Citizens, for a company that wants to depopulate rather than grow?
Yeah, well, I guess being new to the industry, I was just a year old in insurance, and mainly on the sales and agency side, going into the citizen space as an underwriter. I really had to pivot and be flexible very quickly. And I really liked that. I found that deep down inside, I love the fast-paced environment, and I love just kind of taking on new things and new projects. I think I was promoted about 4 times throughout my 5-year stint at Citizens, but that was because I had the desire and the grit, if you will, to just do more. And I think the management at the time saw that I was young, I was eager, I was motivated, and I was willing to learn and listen. And I think in many regards, that was kind of the reasons for my success and promotions throughout my tenure there.
So almost 6 years at Citizens. So,
Yep.
so is Citizens like most insurance companies where you have a lot of like 25, 30 or 10-year people? Or is that rare at Citizens?
There were people that have retired from working there. I don't think that is like working for a company that has a pension where that the vast majority of people who work there end up retiring. Definitely not like that, but some people have retired from Citizens.
Okay.
And especially it's a needed organization. Quite honestly, I don't foresee it ever going away, just at least within my lifetime.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. Yeah, no way it goes away during our lifetime. Even if we get climate change right, it doesn't go away during our lifetime. Yeah, I agree. I don't see it. So from there, you go to Wells Fargo in the private client division. So that seems, just from the top, like just from a third party view, it looks to me like a radically different role. Like it looks like going from insurance that nobody wants to write to being focused, private client, to being focused on really high net worth stuff. So tell me about that move.
Yeah, so that was about the time, about the 5-year mark at Citizens, I realized that I wanted to do something different and something more within the insurance industry. As you know, Tony, the industry is very large, and so I didn't want to just pigeonhole myself being at Citizens all my life and being in the property insurance space. And so I was just exploring my options. And at the time, I had, my degree, and I had worked on some other things that had given me a more of an analytical background, finance background, things like that. But Citizens, although it was a carrier of last resort, it also meant that we insured homes that were multi-million dollars, because being in Florida, there are homes along the beach, multi-million-dollar homes, and so I was an underwriter for a lot of those high-valued properties as well as the high-value commercial. And so I had an understanding of how to insure a large multi-million-dollar home. It wasn't really about the person or their wealth. It was just about how do you underwrite $1 million or more home. And I understood that very well working for Citizens. And so arguably that was the way I got into the private client division at Wells Fargo, is because I knew the language and the lingo to be able to work with the underwriters and insure those homes. And these were clients who had homes upwards of $10 million, not just in Florida, but throughout the country.
Awesome. That makes sense. And then, so you've got a stint with Nicholson Research Group, but I don't think that was full time. So if that's worth talking about, do mention it. But it looks like your full-time role. Then you go to American Integrity, which is one of the larger Florida carriers, I think.
Yeah.
So how was that time at American Integrity?
American Integrity was phenomenal. I think next to Citizens, that was my longest period of time that I had worked for an organization. Nicholson Research Group was a part-time or what they call a side hustle, if you will. So I was doing consulting work while I was working at Wells Fargo and things. I was doing consulting work.
Was that at all related to insurance?
To the point where it wasn't a conflict for my full time jobs,
That's
but it
very
was
cool that
insurance.
that they let you.
Hmm.
That is very.
It was,
It's one of the difficulties in our industry is that carriers are jealous masters, jealous mistresses. They don't like you doing. They don't like you to moonlight. And if it's anything related to insurance, it's very hard to get permission to do it. And by the way,
yeah.
it's something that I think again generationally it's a problem. Uh, I, I I drove Uber while working at Liberty. Not a lot of hours, but I had fun doing it. It was a fun extra income. My girlfriend hated it, and I ended up writing the book, and it became more profitable to market the book than to drive Uber, so I couldn't do it anymore. It didn't make
Yeah.
sense anymore. But if Liberty had complained about that would have uh, that would have been a big turnoff for me at Liberty, which is where I was working at the time. And for Gen Zers, uh, they see having a side hustle as part of their security. They're a generation that has grown up during times of turmoil as opposed to the millennials, and they see their Etsy store or driving Uber or whatever as, hey, if you downsize me tomorrow, I'm not down to just unemployment. I have something, right? So if we don't allow them that would be really bad for our retention, especially if that's before they're committed to working in insurance, right? Like if they've only been here for a couple of years. So interesting.
Yeah,
And
and
go ahead.
what we see at site is, and also Greg and I, we were putting together all the grit and the research we did with the grit presentation, is that people with a high level of grit. So Angela Duckworth, when she wrote the book, she's a PhD psychologist at University of Pennsylvania. Part of her putting together of the grit book, she created this grit scale, and so we encouraged everyone who took our grit class to take the grit test. And it's no right or wrong, but it actually gave us what the audience typical grit scores were. And what we found was that people who had high levels of grit were people who actually had multiple things going on in their lives that were like their full-time job, maybe a side
Interesting.
hustle. They were volunteers of a nonprofit board. They were doing something as part of their kids' school. They were actively always involved in something productive when they
So
had high levels of grit.
So that is super interesting. So causation, correlation doesn't imply causation. So do we know which causes which? Is it Are greedy people more likely to be involved, or are involved people more likely to become greedy?
That's the question.
Okay, I was just
I
wondering
think we have to tell Angela Duckworth. She used to do some
for
research on that.
real, for
Yeah.
real. Yeah, second part of the book. Absolutely.
Mhm.
I would have to do some research on whether there's research on that, right? There's some meta research. Very cool. Very, very cool. And also at American Integrity, you had kind of your big break, and you went from underwriter to manager, and then to director. So I'm curious if that happened like the textbook traditional I got tapped on the shoulder kind of way, that it's rare nowadays in my opinion, or did you do something special to make that happen, to network your way to it, or how did that go?
Yeah, I guess just looking back at my career at American Integrity, it was a phenomenal company to work with. The people that I worked with was amazing. And I think at the time that I started at American Integrity, they were in ultra growth mode, which I think, is a great time to work for
Great
companies
time,
when they're in
absolutely.
growth mode. At least for my liking, I love
No,
being in growth mode.
Warren Buffett, in the Buffett letters, says it that you're much better off at a company that's in growth mode when it comes to your career. If you do a good job, you're going to get promoted quickly because opportunities are growing. You can do a fantastic job at a company that's declining, and the chances of a promotion are minimal.
Exactly. And so, just all the opportunity that presents when a company's in growth mode in terms of careers, projects, learning opportunities. I took it all on, and there was nothing that came my way that I turned down or was upset about. I was just actively involved, and I wanted to grow with the company. And I wanted to help the company grow. And so that just brought about new positions being created because the company was in growth mode, and me wanting to take the opportunity and just work hard and be great at what I did. And I took every opportunity as I could.
And by the way, how at what point did you get the idea of doing CPCU? Did a company or a manager encourage you, or did you just find out about it, or how did you end up pursuing our fantastic designation?
Well, just being at an insurance company, I think that just naturally gets you thinking about getting your CPCU. And sometimes, as you all know, and everyone knows that's listening, is when you're really busy, you think about it and you kind of put it off and you put it off, and you say there's too much in the way. But I think there comes a point in time where you just have to bite the bullet and then start studying for the CPCU. But it was something as just being an underwriter and moving up the ranks within the underwriting area. I knew that it was something that I ultimately wanted to pursue. Just as from a learning perspective, just knowledge gain, I knew it was something I definitely wanted to seek out and go forward with.
Awesome. And now today you sit at around my age. I feel like a slacker now that I've realized this. At around my age, you sit as VP of underwriting at a Florida carrier, and as president of the board of directors of Site. This is very, very impressive. Very, very, very impressive. I am, yeah, very, very impressive. So I guess the last question, as we start to run out of time, is what other advice, other than what we already talked about, what other advice do you have for the young insurance professionals? Those tend to be the ones that stick to the end of the podcast, right? The busy executives. That's why I let people do the sales pitch at the beginning, because the busy executives listen to the first 15-20 minutes and move on, while the young kids who are stuck in the call center or stuck in entry-level claims or at the Allstate, at the crappy Allstate, not at the good Allstate agency, and they're trying to decide whether to stay in the industry. They're trying to find that wisdom that helps them grow. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, so I'll give the same advice I give to. Just a couple of weeks ago, I spoke to a bunch of students at FSU, Florida State University, in the risk management program, and the advice I gave to them, which I think still holds true to your audience, Tony, and everyone listening, is find that one problem in your career or around you that you want to solve. And so there's at least one thing that we all have of a problem or issue around us that we want to solve. And don't set timelines, don't set parameters as to when you want to solve that problem. Just define what that is. And I say when you define what that is, start working towards what is it going to take in order to either solve the problem or get close to solving the problem or be helpful in solving the problem. And I think as long as you have that identified, your path will progress in ways that you didn't really intend. And so as I look back at my progression, just starting as an Allstate agent who didn't know anything about insurance, and where I am now, it was because I realized in working at the Allstate agent that customers and people within the industry really had questions. And so more than me selling insurance policies was easy. It was the hard part for me at the time was answering the questions that customer had about, am I covered? Do I have enough limits? What does this mean? What does this policy language says? How is my family going to be okay if this happens? And so it was really the whole point of just education that really just got me intrigued back as an Allstate agent. And I said the problem for me that I wanted to solve was to educate people to the point to where they might be better off in managing their risk or being more protected should something major impact them. And that's kind of what has driven me the entire point of my career is solving that problem to educate other people to be better. And it's something that I've just taken on and become very passionate about. And I think you can see kind of where that has led me. And I know that the word passion can be very cliche, but it's real. And everything I deal with on the site board and all the challenges we went through with COVID-19 and having to cancel conference and all the things that my companies things that I do on other activities, my day to day is easy. I'm not really as stressed because I feel that I am doing something that I'm working towards what I truly want to solve and what I'm truly happy and passionate about, which I'm very happy about.
That is fantastic advice. Thank you. The passion might be a cliche, especially when applied to careers. But in insurance, we need as much of it as we can because historically, that's not what insurance careers, the reputation we have. uh, I really like. Part of me wants to go like mic drop, like that. That was just fantastic, Larry. But I do want to add that really spoke to me because not I didn't think about it in those terms, but that's what I did with my career. I happened to find the problem, which happened to be the engagement and retention of millennials and the younger generations in general within insurance. This dichotomy of insurance, seeing that insurance was a great career, and yet seeing thousands of young professionals drop out, and I wanted to solve it. And it just so happened, right? I get the question all the time, like, you're the most passionate insurance person ever. Why don't you work at a carrier anymore? Well, it just so happened that the best place to bring change in this particular topic happened to be with a supplier to the carriers, not directly with a carrier. But that's because my particular passion project, or my particular problem that I want to fix, that happens to be the case, right? If for most people, the best place is probably within a specific carrier. But that is really, really fantastic advice. Thank you. This has been a lot of fun.
Of course. It
This has
has. And
been
Tony, I just
a
wanted
lot
to
of fun.
also say, and I think you talk about it a lot, I'll also add, just in my tenure of insurance of 15 years now, and many people have way more than I do, but just the advancement in technology just from my tenure has just been light years. And so
Radical.
that's also exciting, right? Being able to work with companies to launch new systems and artificial intelligence for training and virtual reality and policy management platforms and conversions, all these different things, claims automation. It's very exciting to see an industry that's so large like insurance utilize a lot of the things that we like to do on a day-to-day basis, like virtual reality on your Oculus or computers or cell phones. We're starting to see that more closely gel with what we do and what we like in our lives. And I think that's what's really fascinating about our industry right now.
And that's the whole episode of the podcast to talk about that. But I do have to say for the listeners, especially if you're young in your insurance career, we are hitting a really cool point when it comes to insurance technology. Because of InsurTech and because of the carriers now it's been like 10 years since they started investing heavily in their technology. And basically, we are at the point where most carriers are getting modern technology finally, right? Like we've gone from way behind to decent or better. And so, for example, like 2 or 3 years ago, when we brought people on the podcast to talk about an InsurTech, if they said the word API, we knew who they were talking about. The only API, the only carrier that had an API was Hiscox USA. Well, I recorded an episode, I don't know, a month ago, and he talked about I think it was Glovebox, and he talked about carrier APIs, and I asked, I was like, so it used to be that when somebody said carrier API, it literally was only only Hiscox USA, and he's like, no, there's several now, right? Not every carrier, but so yeah, we've definitely improved. Like, it's measurable. And the other thing, in my presentation about millennials, I have a part where I talk about the research has found that these are the things that millennials want, and I kind of read them and I let the audience go like, yes, we have that. And the last one is they want to work with the latest technology. And when I started speaking in 2014 at CPCU Annual in Anaheim, that was a resonant no. When I asked, the millennials want to work with the latest technology, do we have that in insurance? The audience was like, no. Little by little, the last time, little by little, that started to change, and it became a lot more of a, kind of, it's getting better. The last time I gave my session just before COVID, the answer was like, Yeah, in some ways we have the latest technology. It's much like it's definitely improved.
It
So
has, and Tony, there's a lot of, as you know, there's a lot of problems that still needs to be solved, which I think a lot of millennials and folks getting into the industry can be very helpful at. Being in the underwriting side, data and analytics is just huge right now. I mean, almost everything that I do on a daily basis involves some aspect of analytics or data management, and that's just one area. But we look at the increase in frequency and severity in catastrophe risk. We look at catastrophe modeling and model changes. We look at pricing and rate making and development and how that's changing, technology, climate change to what you mentioned earlier, learning, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence as things go more remote. You know, these multiple events that are really exceeding historical benchmarks where the models are now being outpaced by, and so there's still a lot of things that need to be solved, and I think that's exciting, right? This is solving those problems for an industry as big as insurance and so important to the economy. I think is really where it's really exciting to have these problems to work towards and to solving and doing great at it and protecting customers and educating people.
I agree 100%. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're coming in
It
at
was great.
about 46 minutes, and I don't want to make you late for your next meeting if you have one.
Wow, time
Thank you
went
so
by
much
fast.
for the podcast is open. If you ever want to do another episode, just let me know. Come whenever you want. A great conversation. Thank you.
This is great, Tony.
Oh,
Thanks for having me.
for the listeners, we both have YouTube channels. I will link them. Well, if you've been watching it on my YouTube channel, then make sure you subscribe. And I will include the link to Larry's YouTube channel. And yes, there is such a thing as insurance content on YouTube. Who would have known? And uh, if you are not watching this on YouTube, if you've been listening to this on the podcast side, take a moment, go to YouTube, look for Insurance Nerds. Well, actually, just look at the show notes and click on both my channel and his, and subscribe to both. Much more great content coming. By the way, yes, I know you're an insurance professional. Some of you might be a little more mature, and you don't use YouTube. Even if you don't use YouTube, if you have any sort of Google account, if you have Gmail or Google Calendar or any sort of Google account, you have a YouTube account, you just don't know it. So we would still really appreciate your subscribe.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.